Hello everyone, welcome to Second Thoughts overview of Malus Darkblade of the Dark Elves. So I played through the initial turns and have some conclusions on how the faction plays out. As always, in the end I'll give you the typical armies I would try out to maximize variety and to try different compositions for a bit of fun. Now without further ado, let's play with Malus Darkblade of the Dark Elves. So for your short victory you need to win the Warp Sword of Cain quest battle and to occupy, loot, raise or sack 30 different settlements. Pretty fast one actually. The reward is plus 3 unit recruit rank, it's always helpful, and given how fast the short victory is, you're bound to benefit from this greatly. Now let's go to the long victory, which is same as other Dark Elves. Achieve the short victory, occupy, loot, raise or sack 75 different settlements. Then you need to control the Shrine of Cain, look at it here, near Ulthuan, and to destroy all of the major factions from the High Elves. Special notes to the Order of Lore Masters all across the world, and Knights of Caledor in the middle here. So unless these two are destroyed by someone else, and even still, you have a very long campaign ahead of you. You also need to maintain control of the province of Eataine here. So yeah, it's a very lengthy campaign. Achieving it would give income from slaves plus 15%, but, well, domination may already have been completed before this long campaign ends. I would hope for a CA to actually change this, but still, for the moment, that's what we have, unless you try to rush through to Ulthuan and you have the luck of these two factions being destroyed before. It may be difficult, it may be tough. So, Malus. He is the tyrant of Hagrif. He's possessed by the demon Zarkan, who is controlled with the use of elixirs, and he has this sort of missions from Zarkan, the Whispers. He influences him to commit acts of slaughter and cruelty, and then there's some rewards for it. In addition, you also get some income from iron mines, gold mines, and marble quarries, plus 30% faction-wide, so you're it's kind of cool for you to go through into the mountains, you know, to conquer maybe the dwarves, you know, that's a sort of good playthrough that you may think about just because of how much income you gain there. In terms of climate, finally some improvement. Finally some improvement. Because particularly, he doesn't have a lot of trouble in the Chaos Wastelands and in the Frozen Wasteland. So it's really cool for him. Let me show you the penalties here. So basically, it's really cool for him. It's really decent actually for even a whole playthrough or even a world conquering map situation. You know, there's only this major location with the Chaos Dwarves here and with the greenskins and the desert here, but otherwise you have very good terrain to conquer everything. So yeah, this is definitely, if you wish to have a campaign with the Dark Elves where you conquer everything, by all means try it with Malus. You're definitely gonna have a lot of fun. Your starting location is quite interesting. So you're here located on a sort of expedition, because your main settlement is located here. It's Hagrif. So it is a 3-settlement province. It would be really nice to start, even though it's very close to Negrond, but you do have an alliance with them, so it's kind of fine. But the main idea is that at one point you're going to have to select, almost immediately at the beginning of the campaign, you're going to have to decide whether you keep Hagrif or you let it go. And that has drastic differences between a campaign already. You know, you may choose to just start over here and then conquer everything, or you may just choose to keep both and, you know, keep armies in both locations, or even you can just avoid the expedition whatsoever. You could just pick up Malus and you just go back and you start over there. So it's really up to you. Now, the typical expansion, for me, I would try to keep both, and involves either focusing more on this area or on that early area with your starting settlement, and perhaps merge both. That would be the case. So this whole area conquered will probably likely already give you the short victory or very close to it. So yeah, be wary of facing too many threats, of course, but I believe conquering towards those, to joining both of your forces, let's say, it's always a good idea. So diplomatically, you're still part of the evil tide. What this means is mainly that order is against you, so, you know, the Empire, Bretonia, High Elves, those will be your enemies there for sure, dwarfs as well, but also that Chaos may or may not ally with you, but you do have an advantage, because due to the possession mechanic, you have a 15 bonus with diplomatic relations with other Chaos factions. So for instance, the Subtle Torture, if it wasn't because I was thinking on conquering their places, I could have allied with them already, which is quite nice. So monogod factions actually have that nice diplomatic relation towards you because of that mechanic. So even though your initial enemies would also be them, there's also options for that. So outposts, therefore, will likely be with Norska. They may be really friendly towards you because you're fighting others that, you know, that they don't like, of course. But other factions, and including Slaanesh, of course, and even Nurgle. So for the purposes of this playthrough, I would always try, you know, to just feed, you know, a Slaanesh faction or a Nurgle faction, a minor one, just to ensure that they survive, and then later on, who knows, I can reap the benefits from them. Especially in Nurgle, I don't know how an outpost would work with Nurgle, but still, if it is possible, it's there. That's the sort of idea. But yeah, definitely one campaign to try out different combinations of outposts, and who knows, it will be a great campaign just because of that factor. Starting with the mechanics, slaves. It's a currency of sorts. It was modified from Warhammer 2 and it now has been improved for version 3.1. It now globally generates income with some nice buffs if you obtain vast numbers of slaves. Now these slaves are used for a variety of things. For instance, you can rush the construction. I can spend 270 slaves to rush the construction of this, similar to how the Chaos Dwarfs work. You also have dictates. I already have one in effect, the one for control. So basically, you spend some slaves and it gives you that for the duration, it gives you, for instance, in this case, 1,500 gold, or it could give me 50 growth for 5 turns, which is great, and 10 control for 5 turns. In this case, I actually really want to gain control of this so that I can keep moving with Malus, so that's the one that I selected. You know, it's cheap, honestly. 200 slaves, you can kind of get those with a medium battle, you know, so, and especially if you spec your lord with gaining additional slaves from combat, so yeah, that sort of synergy can exist there. Now, you also use slaves for rights, so you also have rights. The first one is the right of the War Master. You need to be in full control of the possession with Malus to be able to unlock this. It is very expensive, but of course, come on, it gives you a whole army of monsters that will spawn at your capital. Who knows, of course you do pay the upkeep, but who knows, this is precisely what you need to just start a major conquest near your capital. So yeah, it's a nice sort of mechanic. You know, if you gain control, you gain the possibility of doing this, you just save up some money and then poof, you have a really powerful army to do a nice bit of conquering with. You can also gift to the Witch King, which is, of course, it costs slaves. This one costs gold, but these all cost slaves. And it will give you a dilemma to offer the choice of a Dark Elf hero. So then it is summoned to your faction leader. Now, the interesting part is that the hero rank is dependent on the number of settlements that Naggarond controls. So the better Naggarond is, the better the hero will be. Then you have Sacrifice to Method for, of course, to be able to get a Black Arc. You already start with one, which is really great. These are basically the sort of mobile horde factions at sea, really. So recruitment, replenishment, they have bombardment abilities, really cool. And then you have the Sacrifice to Cain, a very typical one with casualties captured post-battle. Note, this is important. It may be relevant to spend, you know, some slaves. Typically, I would do this when I'm about to hit the maximum of slaves. So I'll use this. Even though it lowers a little bit, I'll get them eventually, and I still benefit from everything else. Especially with that army ability, you know, a nice explosion, 3 uses. It's really cool. So, yep, that's the sort of rights that you can get. Now, all of your lords have loyalty. let me get that one. All of your lords have loyalty, so of course just ensure that it doesn't reach minus that it doesn't reach 0, because if it does, he will rebel, and so will his forces go with him, so that's a little bit of a problem. Keep an eye out, of course, with the loyalty of your lords. Speaking about every lord, there's one of the best mechanics in the game, which is actually the names of power. So you'll choose more on that later. I have an image that will assist, but you'll choose at level 10 whether you want a martial, revered, or aristocratic name of power, with vast implications for both that lord, that army, and the campaign in itself. It's one of the best mechanics. It totally changes how you may play a specific lord just because of one skill, which is amazing. Now, let's talk about Black Arcs again. They are, like I stated, mobile platforms. You have the ship building with them, of course, and this is mainly what many people go for when they want to recruit. They just get one or several Black Arcs, of course, but in the beginning one to build up completely so that they can unlock all the military forces they need, and they just use the settlements for proper income and growth, basically. A mix and mix idea for me. It's probably the best, you know, but overall nothing wrong for you using this, especially if you're conquering typically coastal settlements, of course. Now for Malus still, before I don't go there, you can occupy and build the Shrine of Cain and construct the Widowmaker, basically the Shrine of the Widowmaker, to get the Sword of Cain, of course. It may be your interest, you know, it should be interesting as well for Malus. He's already hated by many, so yeah, that may be a cool idea to have him with the sword. Who knows, he's a one-man army with the sword, but yeah, it's up to you. Now, specifically for Malus, let's talk about possession. Oh, you heard him. There's the possession mechanic. Zarkan's influence over him will cause this, so there's tremendous buffs when he's in full possession. Look at that, diplomatic relations plus 50 with Demons of Chaos. This is really cool because you can get some alliances with them, like you saw previously, and that ward save melee attack for the faction leader's army and missile strength for the army. It's crazy, but the Slanesh corruption is the bad part. Also, the bad part is that you don't get the advantages of being in full control. When you're in full control, you actually unlock the right of the War Master, that big army that you can unlock with 12,000 gold. And look at those, growth and corruption in all provinces. That's crazy good. So, of course, your faction leader is not as powerful in combat. Look at that melee attack reduction. But still, he's still powerful in combat nevertheless, even with that debuff. And of course, if you want to reduce this, by the way, it would always increase, but to reduce is with the elixir, you know, the uses of the elixir, and it is with being on a settlement. One note here is that the elixir costs some gold, and it is increasing until he gets the recipe from Malekith. It's an interesting mechanic here. And then you have the Whispers, these eyes here. So the Whispers is basically Zarkan giving him missions. And with those missions, they're really good. They can give you some nice rewards. I'm going to show you one, and they nearly always will provide some levels of possession. So completing those missions gives you good rewards, but it also gives you some trouble. So Balneth Pale, for instance, this was a reward. Income from post-battle loot plus 10% all characters. This was on turn 5, by the way. So it's like having this as a faction unique bonus, you know, like Black Arc growth plus 5 and melee attack plus 8 when fighting at sea. All units in an army. It's really good. So basically, you can get some quite interesting rewards from the Whispers, and of course it's just linked to the possession mechanic, but it's a really cool mechanic to have, and I'm very interested. I was familiar with it, but now I'm even more interested in having that. So in terms of province edicts, we have control +4, which is nice. Income from all buildings. These are very typical ones. And then we start with the different ones. So income from post-battle loot +5% faction-wide. This is always nice. Can you imagine all those forts where typically the edicts don't do anything? Well, you now have one. And also recruit rank and weapon strength for armies in province. A good defensive one, basically, or when you're recruiting. Another defensive one we have is the enemy hero action success chance reduction, more ambush success chance for you, and chance for intercepting an army. So for instance, right now I'm at war with Torex. Definitely if I would have him wandering around my lands, I would use this. So yeah. And then we have any rust construction slave cost reduction 10% and more growth. Very good. These were recently changed, which is always nice because previously there were some reduction of slaves with the edicts, and I think it's the right decision here. Now in addition to the province edicts, so we also have the stances, and this is important here. So you have a channeling, gives window of magic, power reserve, and enables replenishment of foreign territory. Memorize this. It costs 10% movement. And then I have raiding, which gives you immunity to attrition, and it only costs 25% move, by the way. Raiding also gives you slaves, which is always interesting, but note this. You don't have an encamp stance. So you cannot be both immune to attrition and replenishing in foreign territory, which is a big problem for the Dark Elves. Malus, of course, because he has little issues with climate, until he reaches like the desert or the Badlands. It's better, but typically the Dark Elves really suffer from this. And then we have the ambush, 25% move, and forced march, the typical ones. So in terms of buildings, Haggrave, you have two specific buildings. So one gives growth and a ton of bonuses for Black Ark Corsairs, recruitment, upkeep, recruitment cost, reduction, upkeep cost, recruit rank, and income from ports. There's only one, by the way, which is your own, but still it's nice to have that additional there. And then we have a income generated, really good income building, more resources as well with iron and marble production, then recruit rank for Cold One units, and also reduced upkeep for them, and an additional upkeep reduction 60% for all units in the region. So it is great to give you this idea of using this as a military recruitment province, so you'll pay less in upkeep while you're recruiting and making your decisions, while you're waiting for the units to get recruited. It's always nice. Speaking of military, it requires 7 buildings, 3 of which can be built in minor settlements, which is always cool. Tier 3 units are already very good, you have some defending units, you have some good infantry, fast infantry units, you have some good archer units as well, you have some fast cavalry units such as the Doomfires or even the Dark Riders, especially early on. So yeah, you have good options in the Tier 3, of course Tier 4 and 5 are the best units, but still, don't neglect the Tier 3 units for your military. Speaking of infrastructure, you have a growth and casualty replenishment rate. There's additional effects, typically reducing slaves per turn when you have specific numbers of slaves. So for instance, when you have 19, it reduces the slave but gives you some growth. When you have, here is when you have 44 or more slaves, so it gives you income. This is an income-based building. And then you have the control building. Okay, so when you have 25 or more slaves, it starts reducing the slaves. And then you have a slave market, which reduces control, but it does give you a reduction in the slaves used by buildings and in the slave cost for dictates. This is nice. Okay, and then we also have the black roads here for transportation. So campaign movement range for your armies, income from trade tariffs, income from all buildings, and income from slaves. So basically, if you have a really good province that is giving you a lot of gold, just consider having at least one of these buildings around. Now, in terms of research, let's speak of research. It is a great tech tree, by the way. It adds tons of buffs to campaign, to units, some control, some growth here and there, some income from post-battle loot, and then some good buffs for your units. Of course, they'll become really good. Your units, in the end, by the time that you finish this, your units are really powerful in battle. Nearly one of the most dangerous armies to have to face against. So yeah, it's kind of good that you try and check out what the advantages are, because maybe you'll focus on specific units, maybe you'll focus on growing or getting better in campaign. It's up to you, but it's sure that just you have a plan, like I always recommend. So as always, we have the specific Lord skills. We have the yellow line, or melee, or caster. He's not a caster, by the way, so yep, you have that. He still has decent abilities. Then you have the red line, or army, and the blue line, or campaign. Starting with the blue line. Now, you do have an increase with casualties captured, so this helps because of the slave mechanic as well. And then we have the quartermaster here for less upkeep, and you also have the replenishment rate combined with the attrition. I always love when they combine this skill, because it helps so much as well. So it may, because he's not a caster, you may be able to reach this without you know, too much issues, or maybe you want lightning strike as well. But yeah, it's really up to you. In terms of red line, proves to be kind of like average to expensive. More on this later, but you kind of have elite units separated from the low tier units, so that alone typically causes some issues, because of course you cannot invest on one point and then have it, you know, influence every single unit of that type throughout the game. So when you have wish to have some variety in your armies, it's a little bit of a problem. And note for the Beastmaster's Lords specifically, let me show you here, because they do have quite a lot of buffs to, you'll see this later, to cold ones, to monsters, and it's kind of similar to Rakarth, where it's kind of a good campaign to have it thematic, especially with the cold ones. So yeah, it's one of the things that you may wish to invest on, but up to you. Of course, you can use other lords as well. Just if you wish to keep it thematic, well, here's that suggestion. In terms of heroes, you do have the Master here, a very good anti-large hero. Then we have the K-Knight Assassin. It's very good, of course, as an assassin in the battle. And then we have the Death Hag, which replenishes troops. This may be important, especially in uninhabitable climates. And finally, of course, we have the Sorcerers. Most schools of magic that you have are all really nice. They're focused on damage dealing, or buffs or debuffs, so it works well with the general concept of the faction, which is dishing out tremendous amounts of damage once you're close up. So here we have the list of names of power. They can tremendously change the army composition that you go for, so I recommend that you check these, ensure that you adapt when you obtain the names of power. Of course, you'll be giving a random choice between two, so it's not like you can be sure of what you'll have, but in essence, try to take advantage of it and build accordingly. Redline skills, as spoken before, are quite average to expensive. It is difficult getting good combinations for the late game without spending too many redline skill points. You know, many things are divided, such as the missile units or the cavalry units subdivided, the infantry units divided. It always creates these sort of issues. Now, in terms of Malus, here's bonuses for the Cold One units, so some combinations with those and other infantry units and other monsters, you know, are in order. This is more of a missile, let's say, focused combination. There's 5 units of missiles here, basically. This one is more of a, you know, of really big monsters with some war hydras and some fire breath attacks. Basically, that's the sort of idea here, still with the infantry line. And this is a sort of, you know, kind of funny composition that you can have, because everything is quite mobile here. The shades can hide and they can pick up on any targets, and even your Lord, Master, and the monsters can become your front line with the cavalry still moving on the side. So yeah, it's always a decent idea. Do note that you also have that enemy leadership debuff from the Avatar Terror, which is always nice, so terror units will cost even more. So yeah, there's always some interesting ideas that you can choose. Then we have some typical basic combinations that I would like to recommend. So this one is more like a sweeper army. It's only tier 3 units, so it's kind of like one that you can have to conquer some coastal cities or wreak havoc somewhere, you know, not something that you'll use against any chosen stack, but certainly something they can fight on their own against minor enemies. And then, like I stated previously many times, Beast Masters can have a variety of compositions based on the buffs that they give to monsters, so go all out on those. I just provide you with a couple of them, of course, but by all means you could use others. Note how effective this one, for instance, is in terms of redline skills, which is very difficult to get, and it's still quite a nice front line. Lots of fire overall, and still, you know, breath attacks for sure. You have 5 units that can have breath attacks, let alone anything that you get, you know, in terms of Lord as well. So yeah, basically a really some nice compositions. Go all out on them, have some variety, which is, you know, for me, all the fun that I like to have. So for final notes, Malus has a very cool start. You have to choose your initial idea of maintaining yourself in the expedition idea, or going back, or controlling both. It's really up to you, but that alone provides you some replay value. You may play this campaign once, staying in the expedition, and the other time just trying to keep both, or just going back. Adding to this, the possession mechanic has quite a lot of influence throughout the game, and he can become a massive one-man army if you wish. The main advantage that I see with him with the other Dark Elf Lords still is the climate. By far he's the best to try out a domination campaign with, given both his position, tolerance to most climates. The diplomacy idea with Chaos may also turn this campaign into quite a nice one for a change. Now, your army consists of great infantry, great missiles, great cavalry, although a little bit expensive, not with Malus, but with the others, great single entities, good flyers, armor-piercing emphasis, there's armor-piercing everywhere, you do lack some health, and you lack some range. Now, replenishment is good, especially in good climate, of course, and you do have a hero to increase it if you wish. Still, I believe it is now time to tame the demon or unleash it with Malus Darkblade.